Your knowledge of contract language is imperative.
You must know what a violation looks like if you wish to be active in its cessation.
It is important to understand that being active and knowledgeable affects your overall bargaining strength.
Together, we can forge a more militant NALC.
Good morning, and welcome back to Parcels of Knowledge, that podcast dedicated to delivering knowledge to the city letter carrier with your host, the Roseville Wrecking Ball. Forgive me today if my voice sounds a little bit off. I'm recording from a different mic, and I'm also sick still, so bear with me. But I think today's important. Today is a special episode, something I've been sitting on. But due to recent events, I really think I should put this one out there. I got some information you guys are really going to want to know. First, though, I do want to mention you only have 1 week. It's actually 6 days because we're recording on November 30th, but you have 6 days to submit questions to Corey Walton, Executive Vice President candidate for the NALC upcoming election. If you haven't already done so, submit them to me, and he will answer any question thrown his way. Please send it to my email, rosevillewreckingball@yahoo.com. That'll be in the description. And you can even text them to my mobile if you'd like at 586-209-1902, 586-209-1902. Also, my mobile is open for people to discuss the issue that this episode is about. And that is the carrier pay anomaly is what I believe it's called. So the meat and potatoes of today, there is a pay anomaly that is happening. And I think it's underdetected, in fact, and affecting a lot more people than we know about. My understanding of this started when I was a brand new steward. It was winter of 22, and a carrier came to me telling me that their pay rate is messed up. They said that they converted with other people and that they are behind the others in pay. I asked her if she had extended periods of time off. She said no. Make sure you understand that extended periods of time off could affect your pay rate because it kind of essentially freezes you where you are, but it has to be a long amount of time. It's usually people with injuries. I delved deep into her situation and found out she was dealing with what they called the pay anomaly. My branch president and my formal A at the time both told me I was wrong. What I was suggesting was impossible and that just simply it does not happen. I persisted for 6 months, where they finally let me file a grievance after the NBA told me I was right. And it turned out that I was, in fact, right. She had been experiencing the pay anomaly. This was something that's supposed to die off with Table 1. Simply put, Table 1 was different amounts of weeks for different steps. For example, the first 2 steps were 96 weeks to overcome, but other steps were closer to 46 weeks. This created a pay anomaly in which if a carrier bid between different rates, for example, a carrier bidding onto a T6, if they bid back, they would reset their progress for the next pay step because of this issue. From what I'm told, they would top out at the same amount of time. So, for example, if you topped out at 12 years, they would kind of jump at the end and top out at 12 years. But at the end of the day, they would have to deal with a pay issue. When Table 2 was created, this issue was supposed to be resolved when they decided to make every step the same amount of weeks, which is 46 weeks in between. This is why my branch doubted my assertion that there was an issue. This was not supposed to exist any longer, and it's unusual for payroll to make any type of mistakes in this nature. I have a feeling a lot of people are dealing with this right now and don't even realize it. I've had 2 people reach out to me about this issue this weekend. And for every squeaky wheel, there's probably 10 quiet ones. For those people who are wondering if they're dealing with this, if you did not offset your wage progression by being out for a long period of time, and if you are in Table 2, take the amount of weeks it's been since you converted and divide it by 46, because there are 46 weeks in each progression. You can find this on a lot of websites will give you, just type in Google, how many weeks since this particular date. If it gives you days, you could divide that to figure out how many weeks. The number you get, for example, 3.7, should convert into how many progressions you should be at. So for someone who got 3.7 as the amount of 46-week periods since they've been converted, they should be at Step D, almost Step E. 0.7 towards Step E. This has had a pattern. It's almost always people who are PTFs who become T6s and then back to regular. I'm not sure if that's the formula for the issue or simply a coincidence, but I do know that the T6 position has a lot to do with this issue. I am going to read out of the JCAM about this issue, and I'm going to close with how I would attack it myself, including I'm going to also read from some of my contentions that I had. So let me bust out the JCAM. Okay, here it goes. I'm going to read the relevant parts. The promotion pay anomaly occurs when a Table 1 letter carrier is promoted to a carrier technician position, and they begin a new waiting period for the next step increase in that level, and as a result earn less for certain periods if the carrier had never been promoted. This anomaly occurs because in certain situations the carrier would have received a step increase earlier if he or she had not been promoted. The anomaly is an unintended result of the 1984 contract negotiations, in which the interest arbitration panel added several new steps to letter carrier pay levels. The anomaly typically occurs when a non-carrier technician is promoted to a carrier technician position. For example, consider the case of a carrier hired in October 2001 at non-carrier technician Step A, whose first scheduled step increase to non-carrier technician Step B was set for August 2003. In December 2002, after serving 60 weeks, she bid on a carrier technician position and was required to begin a new waiting period for step increase to carrier technician Step B. Her pay increased immediately by approximately $1,701 annually, yet 36 weeks later, she would have received a step increase to non-carrier technician Step B had she not been promoted, which would have raised her salary by $3,327 annually. So 36 weeks after her promotion, the carrier was earning $34,918 annually at carrier technician Step A, or $1,626 less than she would have earned had she never been promoted. In this case, the pay anomaly abated when the carrier reached carrier technician Step B because that salary was higher than that for non-carrier technician Step B. However, the anomaly then reoccurred 60 weeks later when she would have received a step increase to non-carrier technician Step C had she never been promoted. This is because non-carrier technician Step C exceeds that for carrier technician Step B. In fact, the anomaly would continue off and on until the carrier reaches carrier technician Step D. From that point forward, the carrier technician's salary would generally be above what she would have earned by staying in non-carrier technician position. 1990 settlement. In 1990, the NALC and Postal Service reached an agreement to resolve the promotion pay anomaly. It provided that no employee will, as a consequence of a promotion at any time, be compensated less than that employee would have earned if the employee had not been promoted. Instead, merely advanced in step increments in that employee's grade as a result of fulfilling the waiting time requirements for step increases. This includes affected employees who are or were promoted to a higher grade and subsequently reassigned to their former grade. For each pay period following promotion, the employee's basic salary will be compared to the basic salary the employee would have received for that pay period if the employee had not been promoted. For those periods, the later amount is higher. The difference will be paid to the employee in a one-time lump sum payment. The lump sum payments provided by the settlement are calculated based on all paid hours, including paid leave. The lump sums are paid on a quarterly basis on a schedule determined at the beginning of each calendar year. This isn't a thing anymore. So, who is affected? The promotion pay anomaly ordinarily affects those carriers who are at Step C and below, which, by the way, it seems to be still the case, except in a few cases in which carriers loses more than 88 weeks in waiting for a promotion. By the time the carrier reaches Step D, the pay schedule works as intended. So, return to the non-carrier technician position. The 1990 settlement agreement also required ELM 422 to be modified to make clear that employees returning to non-carrier tech positions must be assigned to the step and the next step increase date as if the service had been uninterrupted to the non-carrier technician position. In other words, all time, including time spent in the carrier technician position, is credited toward determining the date of the next periodic step increase in the non-carrier technician position. As a practical matter, this means that any carrier technician who later successfully bids on a route ends up exactly where they would have been in pay terms, had they never left the non-carrier technician position. In such situations, the time temporarily lost as a result of the beginning of the new waiting period as a carrier technician is fully restored. Re-promotion to carrier technician. A particularly complex situation arises in the case of carriers re-promoted to carrier technician position. That is, when periods of time spent in carrier technician position are interrupted by a period of time in a non-carrier technician position. The situation is controlled by the provisions of ELM section 422.123.8.4. That section specifies that a re-promoted employee is placed in the higher level with credit toward the next periodic step, as if the employee had remained continuously in the previously held carrier technician position. For example, say a carrier was promoted from non-carrier technician, step B, to carrier technician, step B, then returned to non-carrier technician, step B, and subsequently received a step increase to carrier technician, step C. If the carrier then successfully bids on carrier technician position a second time, he will not necessarily be placed in carrier technician step C. This is because he started a new waiting period. So, calculation of a promotion pay anomaly payment. Generally speaking, so long as the individual service history and hours information about the employee are correct, anomaly payments will be calculated and paid correctly by the Postal Service. You can use this in your cases to say, hey, look, they already agreed to pay it. If it's determined that a carrier step placement or waiting period was incorrectly established in the past, the Postal Service will calculate the amount of the resulting overpayment or underpayment. In the case of overpayments, it is possible that they will initiate an employer claim. Such payments are made to correct a mistake and should not be confused with promotion pay anomaly payments. Let's see. So letter carriers in Table 2 who were initially promoted from non-carrier technician position to a carrier technician position received a promotional pay step increase that will retain the step increase awarded under the promotional pay rules that were in effect at the time. However, there's an exception to this rule. Letter carriers who are awarded a non-carrier technician position from a carrier technician position lose the promotional pay step increase they received when they were promoted. They are placed in a step and with credit toward their next step increase as if all career postal service had been in a non-carrier technician position. Letter carriers who lose their promotional pay step increase by being awarded a non-carrier technician position from a carrier technician position and then later are awarded a carrier technician position receive the promotional pay step increase they lost. The employee is assigned to the next step in the carrier technician position with waiting period credit toward the next date, as if he or she had remained continuously in that previously held carrier technician position. And one other thing I want to make mention that might be a big deal in your guys' cases is that PTF pay and credit toward steps in as a PTF will be moved over to your regular status. So here it is. All time spent as a PTF will be added together to determine what step in-step credit a letter carrier will be awarded when converted to full-time status. For instance, if a letter carrier spends 46 weeks as a PTF, Step AA, and 26 weeks as a PTF Step A before converted to a full-time status, they would be placed in Step B with 26 weeks credit toward their next step increase when converted to full-time status. So that's all from, it starts at JCAM 9-6. You're going to need that if you're dealing with this. All right, so now you know what to cite if there are people doubting you that you are correct. For those people who are affected by the pay anomaly, I would file a grievance immediately for the pay anomaly mentioned in the JCAM on page 9-6. I would cite Article 9. The materials you will need is all Form 50s that were completed since you were converted. In there, you'll find between one of your conversions, your weeks between steps were reset. This is because the amount of weeks you will be behind will be entirely equivalent to the amount of time you spent in between a certain stage. For example, my person lost all the time she spent as a T6 when she went to a regular bid. This is not supposed to happen based on the language I read earlier. I will read from my contentions from the case file to show you an example of what I mean by the timeline analysis. Alright, so this is from the contentions. The first quote of Article 9 above, referenced in my facts section 3A, all of her time as a PTF will be slotted into the full-time step commensurate with their number of weeks as a PTF and retain their time credit toward the next step. So all the time she spent as a PTF should have carried over into her conversion as time credited toward her step from Step A to Step B. Additionally, the quote of Article 9 reference in my Facts 3C supports that letter carriers who are awarded non-carrier technician positions while being carrier technicians are placed in the step and with the credit toward their next step increase as if all career postal service had been in non-career technician position. Together, this paints the picture that when the grievant became a PTF, it started the clock on her steps from A to B, and that all time spent in each step of the way should have been credited toward her next steps. If this were the case, her actual step increases would have been as follows. AA would have been started on 7/17/2021. A would have started 11/20/2021. B 6/4/2022. And C 4/22/2023. As referenced above in fact section 2, that is not how the steps actually have been applied. Included in the case file are the appropriate Form 50s to show the actual progression that her pay steps had actually undergone. It appears the service had taken all credit of progression that had occurred between 7/17/2021 and 11/20/2021 and reset the progression back to day 1 on that day, which is the day she had been given Step A. If you want to grieve this, you must create a timeline like this. Use Article 9 quote from earlier to determine which step they should be in. For example, it references all time spent as PTF essentially converts as progress toward regular when you become regular. So if you're in Step AA for 30 weeks and become regular, you are now a regular in Step A for 30 weeks. Same as with getting a T6 bid and going back to regular. Your progress to the next step does not reset. If you are dealing with the pay anomaly, you must pinpoint where the progress has reset and where you should stand. The good news is, when you get this fixed in the grievance procedure, it will automatically issue an adjustment, and that will fix your entire pay. So it'll get you like a big check that will balance out what you should have made. That shouldn't stop your steward from doing an estimate, and you guys should always audit the service's math. Now, I was doing the math as we went, because I actually had several different settlements, because management actually believed me when the union didn't. So I ended up getting a settlement over and over and over, fixing her pay, and then asking for it to be officially fixed, and it didn't happen. So eventually we sent it out of the office, and my MBA warned me about something, and I agree with him. He said, hey, wait a second, make sure that you don't issue any more payments, because I was issuing payments every pay period. He said, stop doing that, because if your math is any wrong at all, they might be hit with a letter of demand. Fortunately for me, our math was correct, but he's right. We should probably lean on the safe side and just let the Postal Service do the math when it comes to issuing a check, and then you could double check that math. If you're dealing with this and need some help, please feel free to reach out to me. I'm 100% willing to help get any issue fixed. I'll talk to any steward. I will help you write your grievance. But hopefully you learned something valuable today. And as always, have a good day.
Shout out to the Roseville Wrecking Ball. He is an Article 8 scholar, and thank God. We need Article 8 scholars right now. The Grievance Genius and the Roseville Wrecking Ball doing amazing work.
Brothers and sisters, this guy is good, man. He's fucking good.
And my boy Joshua, he killed it. Man, he's lockstep right now. He's killing it.
You would think this guy has been around for 30 fucking years. That's how good he is. Yeah, it's like he wrote the contract.